last time.
Good morning, Vietnam! I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I feel the need for speed.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Snakes. Why'd it have to be snakes?
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Batman.
Hello and welcome to the Moviescramble podcast. On today's programme, we are going to be talking about the final entry, or maybe not, into the Mission Impossible franchise. Now, joining me today is a person who I think would like to be a spy, but there's the obvious things that you have to do in order to be a spy. You have to be able to blend into society in a normal way. And the crunch of biscuits in a former life, and now crisps would inhibit our fact to be quiet at all times. Now, I had to think about this, and I think that the only way that this person could possibly blend into society would be if there was some sort of dwarf convention in town, and she would fit right in there quite nicely.
Have you know that medically I am too tall to be a dwarf?
So, Mary, how the hell are you doing?
I am really good, and you're so right. Blending in with society has never been the aim in life, especially not with the trail of crisp crumbs that I leave everywhere. And to be quite honest with you, having watched the film that we're going to talk about last night, I had an ache in my back from sitting in the cinema seat, never mind tanking across London at full speed.
So, as I said, today we are talking about Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning.
Our lives are not defined by any one action. Our lives are the sum of our choices. Everything you are, everything you've done, has come to this.
When the need for certainty is absolute and the odds are deemed impossible, the mission falls to him.
Should he choose to accept?
The 8th film in the ongoing Mission Impossible saga that started in 1996. It stars, well, there's so many people, well, I'll just name a few. Obviously, it stars Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt. We also have Hayley Atwell, Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, Henry Sersney, and Angela Bassett, as well as various other people popping up here and there within the story. Some more recognisable than others, and some that have maybe popped up in previous installations. So I must warn you that we will probably have kind of light spoilers for this film, because it's a long film and there's a lot to it, and it kind of spoils itself within the first couple of minutes. Anyway, the film itself is a direct sequel to the 2023 Dead Reckoning Part 1, and it follows on right after the events of the previous film ended. Now, if you haven't seen the previous film, don't know it'd be a terribly good idea for you to start watching this one without at least watching the previous one. There's an awful lot to it. There's a couple of nice wee recaps, but there is a lot in this film that you would kind of go, why are they doing that? What are they doing this for? Now, handily, the film is on Netflix, so you can watch the previous one and take notes, obviously. It's probably good. So anyway, with this film, it starts off with Ethan Hunt and his crew in possession of a key. The key that opens a vault, which is in a submarine, which has the source code for the entity. Now, the entity is the big bad in this film. It is a digital enemy that wants to basically wipe out humanity, either itself or by forcing countries to confront other countries and therefore wipe itself out. And now, if you think that's kind of counterproductive for the entity, it has a plan in order to survive itself, which I don't think we'll bother going into in any great detail, because that's a pretty massive spoiler, and it kind of, you're talking about third act sort of stuff here. So obviously this film is another globe-trotting epic, if you like, 170 minutes, people, with no post-credits scene. So just in case you're wondering about it, there's nothing at the end of this film.
I did stay to the very end, yeah.
Yeah. Just in case. A lot of people do, but if you actually Google it, no, there's nothing at all. And obviously we've both seen it and there is nothing. So, Mary, I'm not going to ask about expectations so much here because we have been kind of fully invested in the Mission Impossible films over the last, well, probably as long as we've been sort of writing and talking about films, I would say, because it's been around for so long. But what did you think going into this film? Were you interested in the film?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is a franchise that I have followed from the beginning. So it's if this is its conclusion, I wanted to see how things were wrapped up, because obviously, like, for example, if you look at, Daniel Craig's last outing as James Bond, I kind of wanted to know what they would do with Ethan Hunt. Would it be a kind of similar fate? I will say that Dead Reckoning Part 1 definitely wasn't my favourite in the franchise, and I had quite a few issues with that, and I think we spoke about that in the pod. So I wanted to see what this film was going to do, because obviously as part of the press tour, Tom Cruise kept, saying things like, it's all led to this, and this is a culmination of all of the films across the 30 years. And so I wanted to see how it wrapped up, what they did with various characters. And also, I mean, I do like the idea of the entity. We are living in an AI world at present, and everyone thinks obviously the robots are going to take over, which is why I always say please and thank you if I have to use ChatGPT. But I wanted to see what they were going to do with this entity, because I do think it is a plausible threat, rather than having obviously a person as a villain, which they do have. But I did want to see how they sort of wrap that up as well, because that did intrigue me.
Yeah, and the previous film in Dead Reckoning Part 1, where Ethan explains to the team that what they're up against is an entity, and Benji starts, or they actually cut it so that Benji's going, there's an entity, there's this AI presence, and he goes, it's bound to happen at some time. So
yeah,
it's very, very sort of matter of fact that it's kind of come to this. And AI is everywhere now. It's all you hear about in terms of, I hear about it all the time in work, because they're doing this big initiative about making more use, understanding AI and making more use of it in everything that they do, basically. And it's everywhere. It's on the news, like you say, ChatGPT, everything to do with that, Copilot, all these very sort of similar engines that can be very useful, but are also very dangerous at the same time, the way that it is being used in some instances, and especially in creative industries. We've heard all sorts of stories, and part of the strikes for the writers and the actors was to do with the fact that movie studios were doing first drafts of projects in AI and then bringing people in to polish it up and try and make it a bit better. So yes, so it's very prevalent. It's a very sort of now topic. Now, after the first film, and I keep talking about the first film because it was Dead Reckoning Part 1, and we expected this to be Dead Reckoning Part 2, but the course correction in that they just wanted to make this a direct sequel rather than a Part 2, so it was two entities. But in reality, it is just a follow-on. You could watch it all in one 6-hour epic, but you would probably
that might be a plan.
Break. Yeah. You would need a bathroom break or a bucket. You need something. So, so yes, I was looking forward to it. I felt a wee bit jaded after the last one because there wasn't much of a conclusion, and the publicity around the last film focused very heavily on a particular stunt.
Yeah.
Which actually proved to be the big finale element of the film, which was very disappointing because they basically gave away there's no tension then about what's actually going to happen in the sort of the big final act battle and everything. Mind you, they did a lot of other stuff as well. But when I started seeing the sort of pre-publicity for this one, I was intrigued again because they'd handled it slightly differently. I mean, the first trailers or reveals was Tom Cruise hanging off of a plane, but talking to the camera, so it was slightly different the way they were doing that. And they didn't explain anything about what that was actually, didn't go into an awful lot of depth about what was going on with those scenes, which was great because you're kind of going, oh, well, this is looking
that
good
could
again.
have just been his weekend. Do you know what I mean? Him hanging off a plane.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a Tuesday.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was kind of excited, and I think they've got a very good publicity team on these things. So the way they put the trailers together, and they have the music and everything, it's just superbly done. And this time it gave you a lot of images without really giving too much away as well. So I was quite pleased at that. So I went into film knowing certain things from the previous one, but there was an awful lot. It was just sort of blank slate. You knew what the basic story was. They were going to have to get the key into the lock. That's pretty much it. That's
that is it.
You could do that in 2 minutes. Just click. There we go. Hey, and somebody says the final reckoning, and everybody stands up and claps and leaves the cinema. So because there was, I told you,
to do that.
I did tell you about that before, didn't I? There was a wee movement of people who went into a film, and whenever they mentioned the title of the film, they stood up, clapped, and then left. Now, that could have been the first minute, or it could have been the 30th minute.
They say the final reckoning in this like 6 times.
Yeah, I know. So even in the first one, they talk about the Impossible Mission Force. This is a Mission Impossible. Okay, thank you very much. So given that this was a culmination of realistically all 8 films, and especially the last 2, so was it easy to get into?
Yeah, like one of the things I will say about this film is that it's almost like a love letter to the franchise itself. So actually, do you know what? Yes, you probably do need to have seen Dead Reckoning Part 1 in order to just get a concept of what the entity is and why the team have ended up where they ended up. But do you need to have seen all of the other films to just enjoy this film? No. But if you have seen all of the other films, there's a real nostalgia about it. It starts with them popping the VHS in the player, and you get the sort of flashbacks to previous missions, and obviously you get the sort of grainy video. And throughout the film, there are little throwbacks, either in just the way scenes are set up, or characters who come back, or they do actual flashbacks to things that have happened. And so there is as I say, a kind of love letter to the franchise itself, and you can understand why they're promoting it as like all things lead to this, because it explains things from other films, or as I say, it brings characters back. So I think it does a really good job of easing you in a way that feels sort of like cozy and familiar, but in a way that gets you excited, like you're anticipating these big stunt set pieces. You love that sort of rumbly brass of the score that goes all the way through it. And you just know with Tom Cruise, I mean, that man is quite willing to commit himself to ridiculous death-defying stunts in order to get a film made. So there's going to be the excitement and the thrill. So yeah, I think it's really easy to get into. But what I will say is that I would say within maybe like the first 30 to 45 minutes, I did have an issue with over explanation in dialogue. So there was a lot of, so what you're saying is if bad guy gets X, then Y will happen. And characters would repeat that back to themselves. So I wish in a way directors and writers would have a little bit more trust in their audience. Like, we will keep up to speed. We will understand what's going on. Like, we will follow this. And, so I don't really feel it needed the over explanation that it sometimes gave with regards to the entity in particular. But yeah, I mean, this is like putting on a comfy pair of joggies. This is a franchise that I'm very happy with, very familiar with, and I would watch on repeat quite happily. So yeah, it did exactly what I wanted it to do.
Yeah, the first half hour or so was a mixture of exposition and recap. There was an awful lot of there was just like small flashes of things sort of feeding back into not just the previous film, the sort of direct one, but all 7 previous films. There was elements in there. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, this is really clever. See the way that they've retconned some of the elements from the previous films in order to feed into this film. I thought that was absolutely fantastically done. Now, the main one for me, and I know it is for a lot of people, is the rabbit's foot from Mission Impossible 3. The way that they got that into this film was absolutely fantastic.
Chef's kiss. It was so good, because obviously up until this point you assume the rabbit's foot is like a biohazard or some sort of like chemical for like warfare or whatever. The way they have put this into this film, that was a treat for proper like Mission Impossible fans. That was a treat.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the elements of the films that people want to know what it actually means, the explanation behind that, because with a lot of stuff they do in these films, they're on a mission to stop a bomb going off or whatever. But with the rabbit's foot, that was never explained. It was just explained that they had to get that. It was important. Like I say, yeah, initially it was thought to be biological because there had to be biological signs on the capsule that it was in and all that sort of stuff. So yes, I was very impressed by the way they did that. I thought, yes, that kind of works. So on that same theme, what did you think of the story here? Now, the story encompasses 2 films in reality, but how did you think it kind of flowed into the second film, into the final reckoning?
So I thought there was moments of real tension in this film. To be honest with you, I didn't know where this story was going at times, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in a it genuinely kept me engaged. There's threat of nuclear war. There's the bad guy Gabriel from the previous film who's still on the loose. Hunt is at a crossroads in his career in terms of, he's really, really on the outside now. I know he's always been the kind of I don't play by the rules kind of guy, but in this sense, no one has faith in him anymore the way that they used to. And so he's seen as a risk. And I thought this flowed really beautifully. I thought the story was excellent. It did genuinely feel so heart-stoppingly tense at times. Some of the set pieces are absolutely beautiful. I'm sure we'll talk about them. And I guess my only sort of, not issue with it, but I guess for me, there was obviously a few guest appearances that I kind of thought were maybe a wee bit I don't want to say pointless about anyone's career, but it could have been anyone playing that role. It didn't necessarily have to be a name actor. But I did think that it flowed really well. It's got the right amount of tension, the right amount of risk as well, because I know that we all know that Tom Cruise does his own stunts, but there was a couple in this film where I was like, this guy's going to die. We're going to watch Tom Cruise die on screen. There's just no way he's getting out of this. And so that level of threat, which I think is really hard to sort of generate, I think it does it really well. And as I say, I genuinely didn't know how the film was going to conclude. On a simple level, we've talked about the story being he just needs to put the key in the vault. But I mean, it's never that simple, is it? And I like the fact that there was good sort of characterization, like Pom Klementif, who I absolutely love in every interview I've seen her in. I think she's just the right amount of quirky and eccentric, and I love what they did with her character in this film as well. And they had loads of lovely throwbacks. There was obviously the masks coming off and all this sort of thing. So it had all of the elements that I wanted it to have and genuinely kept me engaged. That's why I'm saying I can't believe it was nearly 3 hours, because I felt it flew in. It was really well paced.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with you. It was about an hour and a half into it, and then I looked at my watch and thinking, Jesus, that's really, really fast, because it doesn't stop for breath at all. I was being a bit cheeky, and it is a bit reductive to say, it's just a case of putting the key into a lock. There is a lot more to it.
That is the key part of the story, but that literally is it. He has to get, obviously, but obviously with it being Tom Cruise, it's never as simple, and there's about 25 different locations before you get to said vault in the first place as well.
There's an awful lot going on in order to get there, and a lot of people involved in it, which I think is a very, very good thing. I thought the story was reasonably complicated, and it kept you engaged. It's not a film that you can kind of switch off for maybe 10-15 minutes and then go back and go, well, you could, but you'd be going, well, why are they doing this now? Why is this actually happening? Because something reasonably important is there, and it's keeping the story going. There weren't any real lulls in the story that, it would go to a romantic scene, for instance. You weren't getting any of that, because this film series doesn't really kind of do that sort of thing. There are exposition scenes and some drama scenes and action scenes, and it kind of mixes those up for the whole 3 hours. And like I say, there is certain points in it where they have a bit of exposition and people are repeating things. I think that's got something to do with the fact that the film is 3 fucking hours long. That by hour 3...
Yeah, you're like, who was that again? And why were they doing that? No, I definitely do get that. And do you know what? What I really noticed in this film in particular, and I think it's the case in Dead Reckoning Part 1 or whatever we're calling it as well, it was very sort of almost kind of telenovela in style. There was a lot of these like high angle close-ups, and then the camera would tilt slightly and then move on to somebody else's face in extreme close-up. Meanwhile, you've got the score sort of rumbling away in the background as well. So I felt like it was very high drama the whole way through, but not necessarily in a bad way, because I think this is the kind of campy finish of it all, and I think it kind of leaned into that a little bit. So actually, kind of stylistically, if you were to look at this film and look at the first film, you'd be like, is this the same series? Because I think they're very different in the way that they position themselves towards an audience and how they're trying to engage you. But I do think it worked in this case, because this is obviously the big finale, allegedly. Dude is 63 and still cutting about, you know, flinging himself off planes. So who knows?
Yeah, it was interesting the fact that they showed you in some detail about the body count in these films, and it is reasonably high. All the people it's worked with, and well, that's one of the motivations for it. If you go with Ethan Hunt, if you work with him, if you trust him, you will end up dead. And they gave you like a quick sort of.
I did really enjoy that scene. Yeah,
yeah, of all the people that had been there, especially the women who had been there with them and not made it to the final reel, shall we say. So that was a great motivation for Grace in this film, played by Hayley Atwell, obviously, because she had doubts about, you know, what type of person he was or whether he was actually mad, because it all came down to the fact that in his whole career, he's very rarely followed the rules. He's always went rogue. And that was kind of, and you don't think about that just on a film-to-film basis, but see when somebody actually points out to you on the screen, you're going, yeah, he was just not doing what he's supposed to be doing at any point. It was very weird. So you have touched on the fact that Tom Cruise is now 63.
Yep.
And he started this when he was just in his 30s. He was like 33, 34 when he started this. How do you think he has progressed through the series, and how do you think that has informed his performance in his final film?
I think you can see that his ambitions throughout the series have become greater. So I know that we've talked about this before, but having Christopher McQuarrie sit down and think about the stunts and how they're going to position them in the film. And I think you can see throughout all of the films that his desire to do things that are bigger and more death-defying and slightly lunatic, you know, approach to making films, but he's willing to do that, and he's willing to put himself in those positions in order to make a good movie. I also think as well that in this film he was suitably jaded. You know, he is somebody that's been in this career for 30 years, and I imagine if that was the case in real life, that you'd just be like, I'm ready, you know, hang up my boots and go for a nice quiet life somewhere. But actually you can see how jaded he is with the system. He's having to now beg people to trust him, and he, in that scene where they do sort of read out the list of catastrophes, you could see written in his face a level of guilt and maybe a little bit of trauma about all those that he has left behind, because obviously he does feel responsible for his team. And so, yeah, I thought he was, as I say, the right mix of sort of like, he does look kind of tired, and he does look, and I don't mean that now, he's obviously very physically fit. I just mean like the character looks sort of like tired with the life, as it were, but he knows that he is the only man for the job. And Grace does say that to him quite a few times, that basically the fate of the earth is in his hands and there's no one else that she would trust with it than him. And there's a sort of begrudging respect amongst Angela Bassett's sort of war cabinet, as it were, who all really don't like him because of that reason. He's not played by the rules over this past 30 years, but they also kind of know that annoyingly it is only him that can fix things. And I think, yeah, you definitely got the sense that for Ethan, this was one final mission and that he just had to do it, make sure the world was safe, and then maybe he could think about what he wanted to do with life. But you also get the sense that because it's Ethan, he can't stop, a bit like Tom Cruise himself, like he'll never be able to stop thinking about, you know, security and risk and travel and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I felt like it was a nice evolution of the character. He wasn't sort of like the young, sort of cocky Ethan Hunt maybe that you saw in the first like 2 or 3 films, but equally he's still obviously up for proving everybody else wrong, and a sort of final 2 fingers up to everybody who maybe doubted him or questioned the way that he did things. So yeah, I felt it was, as I say, a nice evolution of the character, and suitably aged as well. Like he is obviously still doing crazy things, but he's not, as I say, the cocky young buck that he maybe was in his 30s in the first few films.
Yeah, he's starting to show his age a bit in terms of the films, just because there was certain callbacks, images from previous ones, and it showed him growing older and everything. But yeah, there was a certain weight to his performance here based on the fact that it's everything to do with what's happened previously. And like I say, that's a weight on his shoulders. And I thought it was a really good performance that he gave here, because it could have just been the same sort of thing that they've done previously, but they haven't really developed the character previously. But this time, there is so much baggage attached to him, and they've
and you
emphasised
really
that.
got the sense of that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, I think that there were certain situations where he maybe met like new characters within the film, and you could tell there was a reticence there to become involved, because obviously, as I say, he's had basically his list of crimes, if you want to call it that, read out to him in a very public humiliation. And you kind of got the sense that there was definitely a hesitancy there, apart from wanting to protect his team. But when it came to new people, there was a real hesitancy to maybe get to know them or trust them or whatever, because he didn't want to have another life on his conscience at the end of this.
Oh, definitely, yes. I was a little surprised how powerful the performance was, based on the fact that this is an action film, and sometimes performances kind of edged to the side, shall we say, in favour of doing the big stunts and everything. But I thought there was enough time allocated to the actual character as well. So there was obviously a bit of a finality to it, in terms of, it was like there was an end game here for this film. That it's, what do you call it, world stakes here, if you like, more than anything else,
absolutely.
So which has not always been the case with Mission Impossible. There have been sort of slightly smaller ones, but it's always quite large scale, and it's getting larger and larger, and this is kind of the ultimate. This is like sort of extinction sort of level event, if you like. So I did think that was very good. Now, you touched on some of the support in here. Now, like I said before, it is a cast of dozens. I think there's something like 92 named actors in this. And there is a few wee bits of stunt casting as well. So what did you think about the sort of returning characters? You had, obviously, Grace, Luther, Benji. There was Gabriel, who was the baddie. Obviously, Pom Klinitiv, who was the assassin, the first one, who there was doubts about her actually making it through, but obviously she's in the trailer, for goodness sake. So it's not really a surprise. And then, like you say, you've got all the sort of military type ones, and there was an awful lot of sort of named people in there. So did you think that there were too many people, or did you think it was necessary in order to tell the story?
No, I'm kind of divided. As I say, Hannah Waddingham, I'm sad about, because I felt that was a bit of a waste of a part, because I love Hannah.
Yes.
She is my Eurovision queen. And so I felt like she didn't have too much to do. I mean, she was like this super glamorous Navy woman who was like, obviously, like, she'd her Michelle Obama arms, and she looked great in a vest top. And she, but I didn't really feel she had much to do, apart from like have a couple of conversations with Tom Cruise. I mean, maybe that's enough. I don't know. Jeanette McTeer, I would have loved to have seen more of her, because her voice in Ozark, I think, is the sexiest thing on television. And she was part of the sort of war cabinet as well. I didn't really realise that you had a small role in it as well, because obviously Simi and I call you Ron Swanson, because we think that's what you're like at work. So it was nice to see you, and you're Christopher McQuarrie as well, so it was like double prizes for you in this. But I did think the supporting cast did a really good job. It was actually nice to see Hayley Atwell's character a little more fleshed out. Obviously, last time I felt like she was perhaps competing for screen time a bit with like Vanessa Kirby and Rebecca Ferguson. I feel like she came into her own a little bit more this time. She's obviously supposed to be this kind of like sleight of hand, cheeky pickpocket type character, and I felt like you got a better sense of that this time around. So I really liked the way they kind of fleshed her out a little bit. And as I say, Pom Klementif, I've absolutely adored in all of her interviews, because she just comes across as slightly unhinged in a good way. And I love what they did with her character. I love the reintroduction of her character, where she's in the boots and the vest top, and she's getting stomped down the prison in Austria. And, all of a sudden it erupts into chaos. And I loved some of her dialogue as well. Like, I think somebody asked her, like I said, have you got any medical history? And she just shrugs, and she's like, I kill people. Like, I loved what they did with her. I thought that was great. And Gabriel as well. So Issa Morales, obviously, who was the villain in Dead Reckoning. Again, I felt like they did a little bit more with his character in this film. I felt like we understood a little bit more why he wanted the entity, what he was going to do with it, what his plans were, the reality that he wanted to create, which obviously would be basically everyone sort of enslaved to him. So I felt like you got a greater sense of some of the characters, whereas like so I've seen Luther and Benji again, it's that kind of cozy sort of feeling because they've been in the gang for such a long time. But the characters that needed fleshing out, I think, got it. And as you say, it is a cast of thousands, is it, where I do wish they'd maybe done a little bit more, as I say, with like Hannah Waddingham's character and stuff like that. But I also appreciate that this film was already 3 hours long. If they'd added in any more scenes, it probably would have got a bit tedious. But yeah, no, I really liked it. And I also liked Tremel Tillman as well, who was the captain of the submarine. I thought he was great. I mean, I love where he was just like, Mister, this is insane. Or like, you know, just basically speaking to Tom Cruise like he was absolutely Looney Tunes, or saying things like they hadn't tested the subsuit. Also, our Love Lies Bleeding favourite, is it Katie O'Brien? She was one of the as well, and it was great to see her in a big film like this, because I really loved her obviously in Love Lies Bleeding. So yeah, there was lots of kind of treats, and you know, oh, that's so and so or whatever. It's one of those kind of films you're kind of pointing at the screen a lot, going, oh, that's whatever. Yeah, I definitely, there were elements of it that definitely really, really worked for me.
I was surprised with that particular casting, because when it was announced that she was in the film, and it was quite a big announcement, I thought she was going to be playing quite a major part in the film. And it was just, you know, in there with the rest of the supporting cast and everything, and it worked, and it was a very good role, but I would have liked to have seen more of her character. Now, that is not to say that we won't in the future. I think part of the reason that there was time spent expanding certain characters in this film was with sort of one eye to a possible future. I'm not saying that it will, and I'll ask a question about that later on, but I felt there was a little bit of sort of secondary world building going on with this, which would kind of make sense. You're establishing certain things.
Yeah, and you know my theory from Dead Reckoning, where they had Hayley Atwell almost identically dressed to Tom Cruise, and I thought, are they setting this up that she's going to take this over and kind of lead the gang? Because I thought that, interestingly, they don't do it so much in this film with costuming, although I will say that it did have one of my pet peeves, is that wherever they went, they all had a brand new colour coordinated wardrobe, and I was like, where are you guys shopping?
Yeah,
like you're in, you know, butt fuck nowhere, but you've somehow come up with the perfect outfit to go on this particular adventure. But yeah, they didn't do the sort of twinning dressing so much in this, but in Dead Reckoning Part 1, I definitely thought they were kind of teeing her up to become the new leader, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
it is interesting that they must be every safe house that they've got is beside some sort of vast shopping mall where they can get absolutely everything that they need. Which is, I mean, that's just a small thing. You don't want to see them like, you know, this is the only thing I could get. Sometimes they actually use that they're wearing t-shirts that don't fit them and things like that, because it's the only thing they could actually find, that kind of stuff, which is always a nice wee touch. But that's not the point in this type of film. I don't think it's more got to do with the whole look from start to finish. So I think that does kind of work. So obviously you had the reintroduction of the Kittredge character last time as well, who was a sort of head honcho within the CIA. Well, he was more sort of in charge of the IMF in the very first film, but he was more sort of involved with the CIA in these last 2 films. Now, I thought his character was particularly interesting because you didn't know what his motivations were for a lot of the first film until you figure out that he is actually one of the bidders for the key itself. It's a cruciform key, they called it, because it's in the shape of a cross. So for a lot of this film, he was regarded as an antagonist. You think that kind of worked?
Yeah, I feel like he's definitely one of those kind of slippery side characters that as you say, you're never quite sure what their motivations are. And for a lot of this film as well, with him and Briggs, played by Shea Wiggum, I was kind of like, what side are you guys actually on here? Because obviously there's, you know, the threat of basically global extinction is what sort of permeates like all of this film. And right up until like the very last minutes, I'm going, who are you working for? Because they hate Ethan Hunt. Basically, they just don't like him at all. Like, that's made clear, you know, from the offset. But I do quite like the fact that, in a way, it's like you do need someone like that, because Ethan doesn't care either way what you think about him and how he achieves his end goals. But I do think Kittredge is an interesting character because, as I say, you're never quite sure what he's up to in the background. And he's a character that he'll be sort of maybe heavily in a scene for 20 minutes or so, then disappears for an hour of runtime and then sort of comes back. And I'm always thinking, and what are you doing during that hour runtime? Like, what are you up to? Who are you talking to? What are you planning? So I appreciate him as a character in that sense, because you never quite, he's something that you feel you can never quite sort of pin down or get a grasp on. And I quite like that, because I think that antagonizes Ethan as well, because he considers himself a good reader of people and someone who's able to sort of like, I don't want to use the word manipulate, but obviously sort of like play people into doing things the way he wants them to do. And he's quite a good sort of, convincer of people, and he can never quite get that grip on Kittredge either. So I feel like we're maybe experiencing Kittredge through Ethan's experience as well.
Yeah, it's kind of the same with the Briggs character as well. There's a small scene there where Ethan Hunt has been captured, or basically he's given himself up more than anything else. And he's having a conversation with Briggs, and there's a revelation there about the Briggs character. But the first thing that Briggs does is he asks about his partner. Is his partner still alive? Is it Degas?
Yeah.
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
He asks if he is still alive, and when he finds out he is, you can see the palpable relief on his face that he wasn't responsible for his partner's death. And then there's a revelation about Briggs's past, which kind of feeds right back to the very start of this franchise.
Yeah.
And what you're expecting for that to happen is for Briggs to become a major antagonist in this film, another barrier for Ethan Hunt. But Briggs shuts it down right away, saying, do you think that's my motivation for doing this? It's just because you're a complete fuck up and you just cannot follow orders. And they just shut it down right away. But it leaves that there, that there's a connection between those two that goes all the way back, and I think may come back at some point. But we shall see on that. But I really liked that. I thought it was very nicely done, and it was tied up very nicely. It could have been used.
Yeah, that was a gorgeous little throwback to the first film. That it was so unexpected. But again, as you say, the way they have retcon stuff in this film is fucking brilliant. Like, there's so many things where it could have been shoehorned and it could have been a bit like ham-fisted, but no, they've chosen the moments to tie up really well. They haven't just thrown stuff in for the sake of it. It all makes sense. It's all canon. It's all, if you look at things in chronological order, it all makes sense. And that in itself, that scene I thought was really powerful, because I was like, oh, that is bloody brilliant, the way that is all tying up together. So another little neat touch from presumably Christopher McQuarrie, and is it Eric Jedrison that he co-wrote the script with? So a really nice touch.
Yes, there was that, and there was another one which was very sort of similar in tone, where Ethan Hunt is talking to Dunlow, who Dunlow again feeds right back to the very first film, and he's got a link to Kittredge as well, in that he gets exiled. It's a throwaway remark in the first film. It says that send this guy to the Arctic, just send him now. Just don't let him pack or anything, just go, because he reckons that he's such a fuck up. And then he comes back into this film, and the first thing that Ethan Hunt introduces himself to him, and he says, look, I'm really, do you know who I am? And I'm sorry. And he says, there's nothing to be sorry about. And again, it completely diffuses that, takes it away in the direction he didn't think it was going to happen, because he could have blamed him for ruining his life, for spending 30 years in this wee listening station. But no, instead, it was written in such a way that he'd had a full life because of that, and he wasn't like upset about it in any way. And I just thought, that's just fantastic. These things that you would think, and you have seen so many times in films, that become the main element of it, and they just said, well, we'll just tie this up in a wee 2-minute conversation here, and we'll just move on from there. And you go, wow, just brilliant, just absolutely brilliant. I mean, obviously you kind of liked that as well, by the way that you were like
yeah. Oh, honestly, when he appeared, I was like, oh my god, it's the guy from the first film. Like, this is so, like, it's such a nice touch, because as you say, there's like a throwaway comment about like exiling him, and they literally fucking have. it's honestly, it was so good. And his character in this, although he's not on screen for like a huge amount of time, but you get a complete sense of who he is, the life that he's lived, and right up until the end, like who he is as a person in terms of what he's willing to do to obviously like do the right thing. And I absolutely loved it. Like the minute I saw him on screen, I literally grabbed Chris and I was like, oh, this is so good. Because it's just, it was so unexpected as well. Like I knew obviously there was like little references, because there's a couple of scenes as well where I'm like, that is literally the exact same scene, but obviously done slightly differently. But when he appeared, I was just like, this is brilliant. And it's a really nice way of like, you can keep things like canon, if you want to call it that, and making sense, and using your, you know, your dialogue from previous films and using the setup like to its full capacity and just executing it really, really well. And I'm like 99.9% certain that when they were writing those first few films and writing that dialogue, they were not thinking about film number 8 in 30 years' time and how they were going to bring that character back and, oh, let's pop this line in because it means we can do this. But it was just beautiful the way that they did it. And as I say, he felt like a really complete character, which I really liked as well. Like it wasn't just like a surprise special appearance for the sake of it. Like he felt like a fully fleshed out human. So yeah, loved it.
Yeah, exactly. Thought it was really, really good. Really enjoyed it. And I so enjoyed his reintroduction, because when they were on the island to get to this listening station and the team were all prepared for action, basically, because it was a CIA site. And when they got there, it was just a wee woman standing at the door, you know, and they were really, really surprised. They thought it was going to be some sort of like military facility, and it was nothing like that at all. Just that was really, really good, really disarming. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was cracking.
And Grace obviously was trying to come up with a cover story saying like, oh, we're British like researchers, and then Benji's like, oh, but you did this, blah blah, and he was like, well, how would you know that? Because that's CIA classified. And they were like, oh, well, there's no point in kidding on who we are, you know, it's just, you know, to get these coordinates. So yeah, I love that as well. It was great.
Brilliant. So we've talked about small elements and things, so let's talk big. Let's talk some of the set pieces here. Now, there are a number of set pieces, shall we say. Obviously, there has to be for a film of this length. What was your standout scene here, your standout sort of set piece, if you like, in this film?
I'm torn between two, actually. I think for me, it has to be the submarine sequence, right? Like there's so much threat there. Like not only is he plummeting to depths that have never been achieved before with these particular breathing apparatus, but he's in a submarine that he's not familiar with the layout. He obviously needs to get to the vault, and the submarine itself is starting to move and tilt on the seabed. And there's that gorgeous shot where it's sort of rolling across all this dirt, which of course is turning everything in the submarine upside down. Like there's a really glorious scene where the water actually moves and Tom Cruise sort of walks around the top of the submarine and the water's kind of following him round before he's fully submerged, which was just gorgeous. But there's a scene where it's just like a tiny moment where the submarine is rolling across the seabed, and the camera pans slightly down and you see like it's going to plummet into like darkness. Like there's no more seabed after that. It's just like if that submarine goes down, he is dead. Like there's absolutely no way he's making it out of there. I thought the threat level was very real because the submarine was a very disorientating like location. Obviously you could hear his breathing, which was really intense as well. They'd obviously sort of amped up how much he was struggling, because before he gets in the suit, they're like, listen, the nitric acid in your body's going to build up. You're going to go into cramps. You're going to forget how to breathe. Like there's every chance your lungs could explode on the way back up. Like you're given this list of things that could go wrong before he even attempts the mission. And of course, that's in the back of your head the whole time he's doing it. And I just thought, and I don't think I breathed out the entire time I was watching it, because this is the moment I was convinced we were going to see Tom Cruise die quite literally on screen, and the character would be no more because he had perished at the bottom of the ocean. So I thought it was really well executed, very, very tense. And I didn't think he was going to make his way out. I didn't think there was any more Ethan Hunt charm or survival tricks that he had left. And as it is, like he really struggles to get back out. You know, his suit's getting caught on things. It's too big for him to crawl through tunnels. There's a time limit on how much air he has left in the suit. I could go on and on and on. It was just a brilliant piece of cinema that felt quite honestly terrifying. Like, it's up there for me as one of the best stunts they've ever executed in this franchise.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. It was probably my highlight as well. I particularly enjoyed it because there was similarities to The Abyss in this film. I don't know if you've seen that, the James Cameron underwater film.
Oh,
where
no.
They're in an underwater station and it's about to go off the edge of a cliff, and it's the same sort of thing. It's just a sheer drop into yeah, exactly, yeah. And it reminded me very much of that. And it was the way that the cameras operated in this. The cameras rolled with the actual action and things, and just the complexity of it was just something else. It was obviously, I think it was the sort of the big piece, and they hadn't talked about this.
This was a complete surprise.
Yeah, there was obviously everybody knew that there was going to be a scene in a submarine, but you didn't know what it was going to be, because obviously the submarine was featured at the very start of Dead Reckoning Part 1. Now, when he actually gets, it's difficult enough getting down to the submarine in the first place. That whole scene sort of prior to actually getting in, where he basically shoots out of another submarine and then has to try and cling onto some, but he gets onto it, and you can't. Yeah, he's always going to get onto it. He's always going to get, but he gets into the submarine, and there's a shot where he's in the sort of the holding area between the submarine and the actual the deck and everything. And when you look, they do a shot in that, and it's all, there's nothing there. It's all dry. Yeah. But then as soon as he opens up the hatch and water starts coming in, it starts to fill up and everything, and it completely changes it, because you think, oh well, if it's all dry, he'll be able to walk to where he needs to get to. Obviously, forgetting the fact that the back end of the submarine is blown out anyway. So because of a torpedo from the first film, and obviously that meant that was the reason why a lot of bodies went to the surface rather than just stayed inside. So there was whole sort of plot machinations around that. But the fact that you're given this sort of false sense of security that it's going to be okay getting into this, it's going to be dry and you'll be able to walk about in it, but then it's not, and there's this whole other level of danger about it. And then obviously the whole thing about the bends and everything to do with that and how it's going to affect his body, and oh man, that was just absolutely fantastic. And because we had no sort of indication of the scale of that, it made it so much more powerful, and everything around it. See the music in that scene as well, and the sort of the soundscapes. The speakers in the cinema were actually rattling at that point. It was so like sort of deep and intense. It was actually overpowering, and you're thinking, bloody hell, this is and this is one of the reasons why you have to see this film in a cinema.
100%. Like this does it justice. I mean, I actually think that might be my first Mission Impossible jump scare as well, because he comes across a couple of bodies that are frozen, and one of them's like pointing as if to like say like get out as well. And I actually jumped out my skin when I saw that. But yeah, you've got his breathing, you've got the score, you've got the rotating camera work as well. You get the sound of the submarine creaking against this like silt on the bottom of the sea, and my head's going, get out there, get the fuck out of there, like stop this mission, this is madness, like ignore the vault, mankind can all perish, we don't deserve this, just get back out. Because there was moments as well, like I can't remember if it was on the way in or the way out of the submarine as well, where he gets his kit like stuck on the propellers as well, because obviously like he's just floating through the sea at speed, and my heart was in my mouth the entire time. And I'm so glad that, unlike Dead Reckoning, where I was like, oh, I'm just waiting on the motorbike stunt, do you know what I mean? Like I did not know this was going to happen, and it was phenomenal. Like absolutely, like what an incredible feat of cinema, and for him as well to obviously go and do that stunt sequence in particular is just, I know he can hold his breath for like 12 minutes or something insane like this, but I was convinced he was going to die. It was, the threat levels were so intense.
Definitely. So you think the film benefited from better lack of publicity, shall we say, on this?
Yeah, like I definitely knew obviously that the biplane stunt was coming, because they've talked about that quite a lot.
Yes.
So I knew that was coming, but actually I didn't know obviously about the submarine stunt. I didn't realize the scenes running through London didn't have the context for them as well, which I thought was really good. A couple of really excellent fight scenes. And also, for me, one of the most tense scenes of the film was the war room, where they were deciding whether or not they were going to obviously release some nukes, including on their own soil. And each of those supporting characters, so you've got like Holt McCallany, Jeanette McTeer, Nick Offerman, like all those characters, and they are visibly sweating buckets. Like the men's shirts are soaked and their faces have all been like kind of sprayed with water, and Angela Bassett quite literally has the weight of the world on her shoulders. And I just thought all of this was so well executed and so well done, and the threat levels felt higher because there wasn't all this chat about it beforehand, and so you were probably a wee bit more invested. You weren't just waiting for the big stunt, in inverted commas. Like it just all felt very real.
Yeah, and the fact that the people who were in the war room had no indication of what was going on with Ethan Hunt. It was complete, and that had to do with the plot, because the AI has sort of full control over the internet. So any communications, you can't trust them. You can't trust that they're going to go through. You can't trust who you're speaking to. So any information
what does that sound like?
Yeah. So there was, like you say, there was a certain amount of tension through the fact that they couldn't communicate with each other. They cut out that whole element of how people talk to each other, and so there wasn't like a countdown, because they didn't know when anything was going to happen. They just knew something would happen and it would be either good or bad. So yes, having said that, I did like the biplane sequence. I liked the setup to it, because the whole point of it is that they can't have aircraft that has any sort of electronics in it. Because
I did think that was really can be clever. Controlled. Yeah.
So there was a very, very good reason why they were in these old planes. And I did actually like the fact that Gabriel was saying, I know there was a wee bit of, bad guy exposition, and when he was saying, I'm getting out of here, I'll be able to get to a safe distance. I have a plane. In fact, I have a backup.
Yeah, I know that was a bit corny, because you're like, oh, well, I know what's going to happen here.
But having said that, because he has been the sort of the human face of the entity, he is considering all the possibilities. So if he gets there and his plane doesn't work for whatever reason, there is another one there that he can use. So you're thinking, so he's building in redundancies into his own thinking based on his experiences with the entity. So yeah, I did like that. Now, obviously, we've spoken about the entity briefly. Now, the entity is your AI antagonist here. There's no face to it. There has to be a human face to it. How do you think that worked in terms of, in comparison to previous Mission Impossible bad guys?
I mean, I'm always going to love Philip Seymour Hoffman's bad guy. I thought he was the best, genuinely the best villain in the franchise. What I do think works about this, as I've said, is we are living in an AI world. Yeah, we are living in an AI world. So it makes sense. It actually makes sense that instead of, fighting the Russians or fighting the Chinese or whatever it is that may have, had this franchise going down another route or whatever, it makes sense that it's something that you can't actually tangibly feel, because we are living in a world where you're not actually sure if the news that you're reading is correct or clickbait. Or if the TikTok that you just watched was AI generated or not, or if the news that you're reading or whatever has been, fact checked or whatever by the journalist who's written it. So I do actually think that this works in the sense that the threat feels very, very credible. And, that the whole notion of like the nuclear systems being taken over by an AI, like that scares the shit out of me, like much more than any sort of like, I don't want to say like cartoon character villain, that's been unfair to Gabriel, that's not what I mean, but much more than any man could inflict. These machines do gather intelligence, and it was like the notion that they would trick other countries into launching attacks on each other. I mean, that is really, really scary to me. Like that is the type of thing that probably keeps governments up at night, like working on, AI projects and things like that. So I felt like it was the right balance between the possible human outcome of that, which you see in the war cabinet as they're discussing, like, what the potential outcomes are, versus this being or thing that seems weirdly sentient and has control and is able to manipulate, but obviously there is no face, there is no, you hear a voice when Ethan sort of puts that mask on and the entity is like controlling him for however like a few minutes, you hear a voice, but even the voice is like, it's very soothing and it's very relaxing, and we're just going to murder everyone on the planet and it's all going to go well if you do. And you're just like, fucking hell, like no wonder this is manipulating people. So yeah, I mean, as I say, obviously I have my favorites in terms of villains within this franchise, but I think for this world that we live in, if you want to put it that way, I think this is a very, very credible threat, and actually one that is slightly terrifying.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I like the way that it was shown that people were buying into this wholesale. There was like a cult around it or something. Yeah, it's almost like a bit of a doomsday cult, because they knew exactly what was going to be happening, and yet they wanted that to still happen. They were very vocal about it, and I think for most of it, it was just young guys. So that kind of plays into the whole incel thing and everything like that as well. I thought that was quite clever, yet quite subtle. Now, obviously, we've talked music and soundscape and everything right through this, so I won't bother sort of going into any sort of depth on this again, but it was very good. I was very, very impressed with it as usual, and a lot of care has been taken with it. So just to acknowledge it more than anything else, that
absolutely, like the homage that has been given to the original score and the way that's been worked and reworked to suit these sort of contemporary films. I mean, some of the brass that was rumbling through the sort of bass line of this, I was getting chills just listening to it. It's such an iconic score. And I think much like this film was a sort of love letter to all the previous films, like the score in this is definitely a love letter to all the previous iterations, including the TV show. So yeah, it's a great job.
Yeah, I really like that. Even from the first film, they have incorporated a lot of the Lalo Schifrin music. There's maybe like compilation CDs. I've got one of them, and it's got maybe about 20 tracks on it. And it's all the music from the original TV shows. And you get that sort of coming in of all of these films right up. And there's an awful lot of it used very subtle ways. It's just very small snatches sometimes, but there are themes that have been used and reused. Like a lot of Lon Balfe's stuff has been used.
Yeah, his work is gorgeous.
The last sort of 2-3 films. Yeah, it's just brilliant. Just loved it so much. And it just adds to the whole experience, I think. It really does, without being in your face and saying, this is a really tense moment, because you know it's a tense moment because Ethan Hunt.
The whole thing's high drama. Yeah.
Yeah, he's hanging off of something. So yeah, of course it's going to be high tension. Yeah.
Yeah.
Overall, let's talk about the 8 films in general. How do you think this film fits in with them, and where would you rank it?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that.
Just loosely, I'm not looking for a definitive here.
Do you know what? I actually think it's a really, as I say, for me, this is like a love letter. I think it's like the perfect conclusion. If this is the end, then it properly like sort of went out with a bang. I think it was, as I say, we've talked about how they've brought in influences from other films, how they've tied things up, and I think it did work really well. I thought it was extremely much sort of, although as I say, I have my issues with like the exposition and things like that, I thought it was much better than its predecessor, Dead Reckoning. I feel like it's really hard to pick where this would go, because Fallout is like my all-time favourite. I don't know, it's maybe like
top half or bottom half?
Oh, top half, actually. Do you know what? I'll give it that.
Fine. Yeah.
Top half.
That's all I was looking for, yeah.
I feel like it's one of these films as well that I feel it's going to grow on me the more I watch it, actually. Because with Dead Reckoning Part 1, I was just like, do you know what? I didn't really enjoy that. That's not for me. And I haven't gone back to it since I saw it in the cinema. But I could definitely see myself going back to this. A bit like Fallout and 3 and 1, where I will happily watch them on repeat. And it's just like, it's a great watch. Like, I could definitely see myself coming back and watching this and appreciating like other little nods that you maybe missed, or just like reliving that submarine sequence. Like, I definitely think it's got rewatchability, if that's even a word, that some of the others in the franchise definitely don't have.
Yes, definitely. I think there's an awful lot more to kind of uncover. Even small things like the note that's passed to the Admiral from the President, and it says the 22nd of May 1996. That's when the first film came out. So it's just there's wee bits like that. So, you know, just really small touches. And yes, I think it's probably top 3 for me in the 8 films, definitely. My favourite is still number 3. I just can't get past that in terms of the favourite. But there's a fair amount of competition here, I would say.
I know. Do you know, I have to say, like, obviously, like, every franchise has its lulls. And if you look at Marvel, if you look at DC, if you look at James Bond, they all have films where people are just like, that was gash, like, don't watch that one. I feel like Mission Impossible is one of these rare franchises where, I know people slag off too, but I feel like this is one of these rare franchises where, like, the quality holds up across all of them, more or less.
Yes, definitely. So, do you think there is a future for this multi-billion-dollar franchise?
I know Tom Cruise is going to be really, like, struggling for money now this is finished. Do you know what? Part of me is like, I love this so much. I'm happy with how it's ended, and I'm okay with that. But do I see studios being interested in spin-offs with other characters or prequels for characters? Like, maybe I could see them doing something with, like, Benji's character or even Ethan. I mean, as I say, I do have my theory that Grace will take this over, but if it doesn't happen, I'm absolutely okay with that, because I really enjoy this as a sort of, like, finite product, if you want to call it that. Like, it just works on its own, and perhaps prequels, sequels, sidequels, and whatever else it is, maybe they're just not needed. Maybe we can just rewatch the films that we have and enjoy them for what they've achieved over the past 30 years. But as I say, there'll be a studio somewhere going, we can make money out of this if we do, you know. So it's obviously, if it were in my hands, I would leave it as is. But obviously I don't run Paramount.
Yes, I think Paramount will be very much of the opinion that they can milk this particular cow for some years to come. So I think it will continue in one form or another. I think it's probably a good shout with Grace, and I think Briggs could possibly be more involved in this, given his little turn in this one. And there's obviously even the likes of Degas as well, who was really just introduced into the team in this film, because obviously he was CIA before as well. So there is plenty of scope to continue this, not necessarily at the same sort of world-defining sort of scale. I think it would be a lot smaller. It would be interesting as well, because obviously Grace is not an experienced agent, so it would be almost like a reset in that sort. And she's basically got a team around her from this film as well. So yes, I did think that we're probably going to get some more here. Now, there was one storyline in this which did not come to anything, which I was really, really surprised at, which had to do, and this might feed into the future of the franchise as well, the fact that Ethan Hunt was brought into the Impossible Mission Force in the same way that everybody else was, but which they didn't talk about for such a long time. They were just agents, but they were brought in because they were given a choice and they chose to accept. And they all have a past, and they all, basically everybody, or what they're saying now is that everybody that's part of the IMF had a past which may not have been particularly savoury. There was some elements in it, and in Ethan Hunt's case, it was murder. Now, you get glimpses of that from him as a younger man, and Gabriel, Gabriel's not his real name either. No. We just know him as Gabriel. Okay. So we don't know what the past is between those two, and how Hunt actually came to be in that position, and who the woman was, Maria. So none of that was, I was really surprised. I thought there was going to be something there that he would have to explain that to someone a wee bit.
For the prequel.
Yes, so there was nothing there, and it just really threw me, because I was expecting that all the way through for there to be something on that, but there was nothing. Now, did you pick up on that, or was it just
I definitely thought, like, because I think it's interesting, because they always say you were given a choice. It's like, it's not really a choice, it's blackmail. You kind of go to prison for what you've done, or you can, you can kill people for the government instead. So I did think it was interesting, because Ethan obviously positions himself as not, as I say, not somebody who follows the rules, but somebody who does the right thing, and obviously is very considerate of his team and doesn't obviously want any more of them to perish. And so for him to have been brought into the fold because he had done something wrong, and not just wrong like he'd fiddled his taxes, he'd obviously killed someone. So you're just kind of like, oh, why, what happened there? Why are you this way? Like, are you conditioned to be this lean, mean killing machine? Or, so I did think it was interesting that they brought that up. And obviously we've had the flashbacks to him and Gabriel in the sort of like archway, like under the streets or whatever, and we see the death of the woman. But you're right, we never heard any more of that. And I did think they might explain that a bit more in this film. Possibly not when they were, at several thousand feet in biplanes shouting at each other. But I did think I did think there would be something that would sort of wrap that particular storyline up, because it's probably the only one that hasn't been sort of tied up in a bow, actually. So maybe that's what they're keeping for the prequel then, if we're going to see like a young Ethan Hunt and how he came into the fold at the IMF, maybe.
Quite possibly, yeah. It would make a good sort of 8-part.
Yes, I was thinking like
story,
a 8-part. Yeah,
a wee TV show or something, yeah. And there's certainly enough sort of clamouring for something like that, a new Mission Impossible TV show, because that was relatively small scale in terms of their missions. It wasn't big stuff. It was going into these made-up South American countries and doing something quite small, So.
I do think, though, that this franchise is fascinating because it has taken like a really beloved sort of cult classic TV show and turned it into this huge phenomenon that it never was while it was on TV, but it has this sort of mass appeal where you've got, people going for like date nights, people who like Tom Cruise will always go and see a Tom Cruise movie, people who were fans of the original TV show that maybe want to do a little bit of nostalgic view and hear the theme song. Like, it really is, like, we've obviously said like a 4, like, is it like a 4 quadrants film or like whatever?
Yes,
like it does. It has like this mass appeal that I don't even think they could have predicted back when they first sort of rebooted the Mission Impossible like TV show with this particular character and made that particular first film. Like, I don't think they saw it becoming the thing that it did or has.
There was a little bit of fan backlash at the very start of this series because the character of Jim Phelps was the main protagonist in the TV show. And then it turns out, obviously, spoilers from a film from 1996, he turns out to be the bad guy. So there, obviously, what we're talking about sort of pre-internet age, so there wasn't the same sort of issues, but people were unhappy, fans of the show were unhappy that he was made out to be the bad guy, which is, when you think about it, it's neither here nor there now because of obviously established Ethan Hunt in such a way. But I shall leave you with this thought.
Okay.
In the very first film, the character of Jim Phelps was played by John Voight. He was 58 at the time when he portrayed that character. Tom Cruise is now 63, playing the character of Ethan Hunt. And if you look at the characters side by side, you would be hard pushed to guess which is the older. No, you wouldn't be hard pushed to guess which one was the older.
I honestly have this theory, though, that people in the 90s looked fucking decades older. Like, if you look back at people in the 90s, like, their dress and their hair and everything was so, like, aging, whereas people now, like, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and obviously 60s, I feel like look a lot younger. I mean, like, Tom Cruise is standing in this film in, like, a little tight sweatshirt and, like, tousled hair and whatever, like, barely a scratch in his face, despite the fact that he's just flung himself underwater. Like, he looks so much younger than 63, and obviously physically he's like insane. But yeah, John Boy 58 looking like 70 compared to wow, that is mad. That is absolutely mad.
I couldn't believe it. It's just one of these stupid wee facts that you get from obviously films that have run for such a long time. So yeah, that was pretty mental. The usual final question. Recommendation?
Well, absolutely. And please, please, please go and see this in the cinema. And if you can, go and see it in an IMAX screen, because that was an incredible experience to watch it like that. It's obviously shot in IMAX as well, or for IMAX as well. But yeah, it feels like it's the end of an era, but in like a really nice way. It's a brilliant film. The stunts are great. And yeah, just worth it. It's one of these big blockbustery ones that I've, loved for a long, long time. So absolutely would recommend it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. Like I said, it's probably worthwhile watching the previous film if you're really wanting to get the most out of this. And also, yeah, like Mary said, watch it in the cinema screen. It's so much better than watching it at home. But obviously be aware it's 170 minutes long, so maybe not a large Coke before you go in.
Yeah.
So yes, yeah, I would definitely recommend this film. Absolutely. On that note, since we have come to a point where it is looking likely that a line has been drawn under this particular iteration of Mission Impossible films, we thought we'd have a wee retrospective look at our favourite Mission Impossible moments. This could be anything. There was no remit on this at all. We just said Mission Impossible moments, so it could be anything at all. Could be Tom Cruise doing magic tricks, you just don't know. Or it could be something bigger or something smaller. So, Mary, what's your first pick?
So I have gone from the first Mission Impossible film, and my favourite moment is the wire drop, because I am convinced that this is the scene that actually spawned a franchise. It's just over 7 minutes long from start to finish, and you have Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt lower himself on a wire into this like startlingly white vault. And he starts the scene upside down, and it's completely silent, which is terrifying in a film that's obviously known for kind of like explosions in its score. You've got Ving Rhames is tracking everything by this like small white dot, and he's sort of muttering to himself as he's watching that, sort of noting who's coming in and out of the room where Ethan is and is dangling. There's lots of really disorientating shots, and we've got Jean Reno in a vent sweating like fuck, lowering Ethan down on this wire. You know, he has to move up and down, and he's holding his breath, and he cannot make a sound. And there are employees going in and out of the room, and he is just dangling there, and the tension is just, oh my God, it's incredible. There are mistakes made. You know, at one point, he is literally hanging over the head of William Donlow as he pukes in a bin. And the room is sort of full of this kind of like geometric print as well, which sort of adds to the sense of disorientation. So you've got Ethan sweating as well. He has to insert a mini disc into the computer system. And you have that classic sort of downloading bar across the screen, which you never know if he's going to make it in time or not. And of course, there's a bloody big rat in the vent next to Jean Reno. I mean, this thing literally has knuckles, and it's crawling across. And of course, he moves his body to try and get out of the way of the rat, which causes Ethan to drop millimeters above the floor, which is where you have that sort of really famous scene of him sort of like splayed out, like literally inches from the space. So we get that gorgeous close-up of the bead of sweat rolling down Ethan's glasses, knowing that if it hits the floor, it's going to trigger an alarm. Ving Rhames is praying, Ethan's praying, we're praying, and thank fuck, he scrambles up back into the roof. But not finished with you yet. In his palpable relief at getting Ethan back up into the loft, Jean Reno drops a knife from the hatch. And of course, everyone's holding their breath, waiting to see if this falls on the floor. And it doesn't. It lands right on the desk next to the keyboard. And then you have William Donlow come back in, and he's looking, going, where the hell did this knife come from? Because that wasn't there a minute ago. And I just think, I'm convinced this scene is the reason why this film is so beloved to this day. I know it's become a sort of bit of a meme and a bit sort of parodied, but it's 7 minutes of like its perfect execution, which you wouldn't expect anything less from Tom Cruise.
Yep, and it plays a big part in the final film as well.
Yeah,
the knife makes
which I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know. Obviously, we made our choices on these scenes on like what, Thursday or Wednesday, and obviously went to see the film on Friday. And actually, two of my sort of top picks really come back to haunt Ethan in this particular film, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's one of these wee nice callbacks that you get later on. But you are totally correct. When that film came out, that was the scene that everybody talked about. The fact that it was Tom Cruise actually doing it more than anything else. It was shot in such a way that you saw him fully doing this, and it was the start of, wait a minute, action stars can actually do this stuff. They don't need stunt doubles to do everything for them. It can be done in such a way that, and they emphasised that quite heavily, that he trained for months in order to get into the shape for doing this, and it was so difficult to do. And it works really well because of that. And it works particularly well because there is no music for the majority of it as well.
Silent.
It has to be silent for plot reasons. So I thought it was absolutely perfect. And you're right, everything else within the franchise was measured up against that first one. Was it as good? Was it as inventive? Did it actually service the plot? Was this did? It wasn't just done for the sake of it. It was actually serviced the plot in some way. And the whole build up to it as well, about when they were talking about how to do it and all the things that could go wrong, and the fact that the floor's pressurized and the temperatures monitored. Yeah, great. So well thought out. And obviously, because it's a Brian De Palma film, it's so beautifully shot as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, can't go wrong. Yep, perfect. Brilliant choice. Well done.
Thank you.
My first choice is the plane sequence from the very start of Rogue Nation. Now, this was one of the first ones that was used as a promo device for the film. They basically showed this whole sequence as a trailer more than anything else. And a lot of people were saying, why are they doing this? Because everyone's saying, well, this is the big, look at how much work has been put into this sequence. So it must be the finale. Why are they giving this away? And it turned out this was the opening sequence of the film. It's such a statement of intent. They've said, see what you've seen before? Well, we're going to go bigger than you have ever seen with this. So the whole point of the scene is there is a cache of nerve gas sitting on this large transporter plane, and the IMF are trying to stop it getting into the hands of the syndicate. They failed to allow it to take off, and it's actually taxiing away. And out of nowhere, Ethan Hunt runs up and is able to go onto the wing of the plane and then basically hold on to a door on the side of the plane. And he's screaming at Benji, who's in the grass in the airfield, to open the door of the plane. Benji he's got a remote access into the plane, so he's able to get into it, but obviously everything's in Russian as well. And he keeps saying to Benji, open the door. Benji, open the door. And then he says it one time, and then the plane just lifts off the ground. And you see him going from the position where he's holding on and he's like sort of face down, and his body just twists around as the plane goes. And the wind's blowing directly in his face, and it looks just like the fact that he is clinging on to the door of this plane. And it's almost like an old sort of slapstick comedy film element. It's like a Buster Keaton thing.
That's exactly what I was thinking about the biplanes last night. I was like, this is like a Buster Keaton movie. Yeah,
so it's like Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd, one of these kind of things where it's very sort of physical. And there's an awful lot of comedy in it as well, because when he does eventually open the door, he opens the wrong door. So, and this is maybe about it's less than 10 minutes for the whole sequence, but it just works so well. And it sets up expectations for the rest of the film, because you're thinking, if they're doing this at the start, what are they going to be doing at the end of the film? And it works in that way, because at the end of the film, there is a big spectacular stunt sequence in it, and there's wee elements of fun in there as well. But this just, it's just like a real sort of standout moment. It's a real sort of high watermark for the franchise in itself.
100%. And again, I think I'm not saying the stunts weren't big beforehand, but I feel like this is where it started to go off the charts.
Yes.
Desire to deliver something exciting.
Nice. Your second pick?
So I'm going for Mission Impossible 3, the Rabbit's Foot interrogation scene. So I maintain that Sean Harris and Philip Seymour Hoffman are the best villains in this franchise. But I always feel really surprised that someone of Philip Seymour Hoffman's caliber is in a sort of big blockbustery franchise like this. It feels like far away from the other work that I've seen, but he is phenomenal in this. So he plays the arms dealer, Owen Davian, and this is his best scene. It's around, I think it's maybe 4 or 5 minutes long. Davian has held a gun to Michelle Monaghan's head. She's got duct tape on her mouth. She's tied up. She's sobbing for her life. And Ethan is also duct taped into a seat. It looks like an old dentist chair or something like that. Mm-hmm. And Ethan is trying to bargain and charm Davian the way that he does with other people. And Davian is just completely straight-faced, not buying it. And I think what works so well about this villain is that he's super calm. So Davian says he's got to the count of 10. And he means it. And there's no chitting about. And he starts off counting. His face is entirely passive, completely unfeeling. Hunt is like sort of bloodied. He's screaming in frustration. It escalates really quickly because Ethan thinks he can lie about the whereabouts of the rabbit's foot and sort of charm him into thinking like he would get it. And so very quickly, halfway through the countdown, they actually end up screaming at each other. And then it all goes back to quiet. And he just keeps counting. And he just keeps counting. And Hunt is crying and shouting. And then you get that moment where he just goes, no, 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 increasing in like volume and frequency. And then it's just done. Fatal shot delivered. And I think it's an absolute masterclass in being a bastard from Philip Seymour Hoffman. It's tense, it's well executed, and it's actually really nice to see Ethan Hunt on the back foot, because obviously he is like this charming sort of like superhero type character, but actually he has no agency in this scene physically because he's obviously tied up, but he can't manipulate and charm the way that he usually does. So there's none of his tactics or usual tricks are going to work here. And I just think that Philip Seymour Hoffman is a completely formidable villain in this. And yeah, his quietness and his sort of like unblinking countdown, I think is really, really scary. So, and obviously this whole rabbit's foot thing came back to fruition within Final Reckoning, which I didn't anticipate, but yeah. And it obviously sort of it informs, like there's flashbacks about Michelle Monaghan through like Fallout and Dead Reckoning Part 1 as well, so it sort of informs the rest of his character throughout. But yeah, I just think it's class.
I think you may have kind of buried the lead in this one as well, in that this is how the film starts.
Yes, so it's not halfway through the film. You're not like this isn't, nothing builds up to this. Like there's no like chasing him across cities prior to this point. This is literally how this film opens, and you're thinking, where the fuck is this again? Where the fuck is this going to go? Who is this character? And oh my god, Ethan is up shit. And this is what I think it really works about it. Like we are so used to seeing Ethan like, you know, rip off a mask or deliver a cheeky line or do this kind of death-defying stunt, but here he is completely powerless, and you're like, fuck, what? You know, who is this guy? Obviously, you know, it's Philip Seymour Hoffman. Also, like Eddie Marsan is like one of his goons in the scene, and he's got like that beautiful curly hair as well. But yeah, this is how that film opens, and so you're on the back foot as much as Ethan is, because you've got no idea why it's come to this. But yeah, what an introduction to a character. And as I say, I love Philip Seymour Hoffman. And in this franchise, I think he's absolutely incredible. Like, if only we could have obviously brought him back for the last one, but sadly that's not the case. But I think he's incredible.
Yeah, it's a brilliant opening. Again, kind of it is similar to the one I previously talked about, and that is the opening sequence of the film. It sets things up so well because, like you say, you don't know what's going to happen, because it goes from that title sequences, and then there's a party. And you're going, what the fuck? So yes, and it's not your typical start to one of these type of films where it's like a mission, it's an interrogation scene, and it's brutal. It really is. Yeah, and a lot of that, like I say, is down to the performance by Philip Seymour Hoffman. Just, immense.
Oh, I feel like I want to rewatch this film like immediately. He's just like, for, you know how we talked in our Braveheart episode, we talk about Longshanks, and immediately the minute he opens his mouth, you're like, well, you're a dickhead. Like, I feel like in this film, the minute Philip Seymour Hoffman starts that countdown, you're like, no, this guy is not shitting about, and he is really fucking scary. And I feel like you get that immediately. Oh, I want to rewatch it again. I think I will.
My second choice is from Dead Reckoning Part 1. It is, I'll do the setup for it. It features Grace, and Ethan. Grace has been apprehended by the police in Rome when she landed there after stealing the key, and Ethan is posing as a lawyer to get her out, and he basically breaks her out of the police headquarters, and they're being pursued. Grace gets away in a police car, and Ethan chases her in a police motorcycle. It is, yes. Obviously with the police chasing them, and Grace is a really rubbish driver, which is not, well, it's kind of understanding. She's under a lot of pressure. she's going through some really, really narrow streets in places where there shouldn't really be cars because there's like wee cafes, things like that. She kind of smashes to smithereens. And it ends up that both the car and the motorcycle get wrecked, and they have to find a IMF safe vehicle, which they have he has an app on his phone which he can pull up for the safe vehicles, and it comes up and it says safe boat, safe plane, and safe car, which I just thought you can dial up a safe boat, which I just thought was brilliant, absolutely fantastic. So anyway, they get the safe car, and it turns out to be this canary yellow Fiat 500 that they both have to get into. Oh, and of course at this point they are handcuffed together as well. So they have to negotiate this car that they don't know how it works. It's this wee electric version of it, which is kind of neat. So it's really, really nippy. And it's how they actually go about coordinating while this chase goes on. And obviously they're being pursued by everybody, but the size of the car means that they can go places that a lot of other vehicles can't go. Now, one of the chasing people is Paris, the assassin, who's in this big sort of... It's a big sort of, it's almost like a tank, isn't it? It's like a big sort of SUV chasing them everywhere. But you get an awful lot of shots actually in the car with those two, and they actually look reasonably petrified for most of the time. And I don't know how much of that's got to do with the acting, but it's just, it's a very inventive Bond style chase sequence with the added element of them being handcuffed and everything. And it goes all over the place, like various sort of nice areas of Rome and some not so nice areas. And the way that actually finishes up, they manage to get into this wee passage that goes on for ages, and then suddenly they find themselves in the underground, actually, and there's a train coming towards them, and it's just fantastic from start to finish because it's inventive, it's clever. Again, there is that sort of silent slapstick element to it with the way that, because it's such a silly wee dinky car that it can get in and out of spaces, and the fact that neither of them can control it properly. At one point, Grace ends up doing donuts everywhere with everybody just kind of watching her going, what's going on? Because she can't, and he keeps saying, take that turn, and no, right, we'll take the next turn, no, and it just keeps going on. And it's just, there's an awful lot of fun in the scene as well, even though it's obviously quite serious because they are being pursued by the authorities. And just, it's one of these sort of standout ones in a whole range of car chases. Let's face it, there's been all sorts of chases in major cities all over the place, but this one kind of stood out for me because it was particularly inventive, the way they did it, and the elements they actually had in it as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, that wee Cinquecento is iconic. And when I ever learn to drive, I want my first car to be a canary yellow Fiat 500 because I think it's just so cool. It's a great sequence, and I love the fact that it's like, because Grace ends up driving, and can you imagine being Hayley Atwell, being first of all handcuffed when you're trying to drive a car that you're not familiar with down streets that are like cobbles, so you're getting thrown everywhere, but you're also responsible for Tom Cruise, the world's biggest movie star, and you're the one driving the car. Like, the pressure must have been insane.
Yeah, there was a story that came out of Live, Die, Repeat with Emily Blunt. She was driving Tom Cruise, and they were doing various stunts, and there was one where she didn't brake properly, and Tom Cruise got very animated, and he was going, brake. And when in the aftermath of that, she was kind of like, I think I pretty much nearly killed Tom Cruise in this. You know, I'm really surprised he was able to walk away from it, but yeah.
Wow. I see just the pressure of that. Just if you ever read a script and it said you had to drive Tom Cruise, I'd be like, no, thank you.
yeah, you're all right, thanks. Yeah. So, your final choice?
I was very torn for this because I was going to do the sequence where he's climbing the Burj, but if I have to rewatch that, I will actually be physically sick because it's too scary even for me. So what I've gone for is a bit of a lighter note, but one of my favourite moments in cinema. Mission Impossible Fallout, Henry Cavill's arm reload. So I think this is one of my favourite moments in the franchise. So Henry Cavill plays August Walker, who's also known as John Lark, and he is the mustachioed antagonist in Fallout, which is the 5th film in the series. So quite early on in the film, there is this like kind of spectacular fight in a bathroom. So heads are being smashed off sinks. doors are being kicked in, people are being thrown through mirrors, pipes are ripped off and used through weapons, and there's all this sort of like balletic choreography where there's like blood splatter across these like really sterile white tiles. So it's a gorgeous fight scene, and it's all been done in like 2 or 3 piece suits because they're in a nightclub that's like quite fancy, which I think just adds like a great element to it as well. So I think this actual scene is quite a highlight of the film. But in amongst all of this, and Tom Cruise doing what he does best, there's a moment where Henry Cavill's character reloads his fists as he prepares to get in a fight. So he strips off his suit jacket and like rattles them. Like, I'm doing it right now, not that anyone can see because it's a podcast.
Yeah. Perfect visual moment, yeah.
Seemingly, Cavill did it as a bit of a joke and was really embarrassed when Christopher McQuarrie was like, "That's great, do it again and we'll include it in the film." And he was like, "Absolutely not, that was really cringy." But like Tom Cruise and all the other like actors like really encouraged him to do it, so he did. And I just think it's such a glorious moment. It's become a favourite gif of mine just to send on a regular basis. But it's just a neat touch for the character as well, because I don't ever think I've ever seen anyone sort of reload their fists before in a fight scene. And so I just think it's really cool. And I mean, it's Henry Cavill. Like, obviously, I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah. He's one of the few modern men that can pull off a moustache.
Oh, and what a glorious moustache that was. I mean,
yeah.
Obviously that caused all the drama with the Superman.
Yeah, of course, yeah, the Justice League.
Yeah, because his moustache was contractual for Mission Impossible, and therefore he couldn't shave it off or something. Was that the story?
Yes, yeah, it was still contracted to do more scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And in between times he was doing the Justice League reshoots. And they says, no, you have to keep your moustache because it was his own, obviously. So he had to keep it for the additional work it was needed for the continuity. And obviously, Justice League had to then do that terrible, terrible job.
They could have used the entity. It could have done a better job.
Absolutely, yeah. Right. For my final choice, I have chosen a scene which I think is probably one of the cleverest and deep cuts of the whole franchise. It is the opera scene from Rogue Nation. Now, leading up to this, Ethan has been introduced to Ilsa Faust when she basically saved his life. When she handed him a key which had, what was in the end of the keyring? A rabbit's foot.
A rabbit's foot, yeah. All tied together.
And there was another scene where he was handcuffed, and there was a wee rabbit's foot motif actually on handcuffs. So anyway, she had been introduced to him during this interrogation scene, and when she comes in the door, there's this musical motif from Nessun Dorma, which a lot of people caught and thinking, yep, that's brilliant, really good. In a later scene, Tom Cruise sets up a mission which is at the Austrian State Opera. He invites Benji. Benji gets his tickets. You have won a trip to the opera, and it's not really. He's there at the behest of Ethan Hunt because they're trying to track down somebody actually at the opera as well. Now, the way that this whole scene plays out mirrors the actual opera itself. The main character is Turandot, that is the opera, and the main character in Turandot is this princess, who actually, the story of the princess in the opera mirrors the story of Elsa in a lot of ways, the way that she doesn't trust anybody about her, and she sets all these tasks for people so that she can end up trusting her. There's a prince character who comes to try and get her hand in marriage. Again, very like the Tom Cruise character of Ethan Hunt in this. So there's these things going on, and there's some musical elements that are played out. Like there's music from the first act of Turandot, which plays out as Tom Cruise comes into shot behind the scenes actually at the opera, and it totally informs the main character of the prince and him at the same time. It's really, really detailed, and they use this all the way through the scene, and they go back and forward to it again. Like during the whole film, they reference these elements, and the music sort of fits in with what they're doing and the setting of challenges and all that. But even if you didn't know anything about that, the scene itself is played out, and it's very sort of reminiscent of Brian De Palma, like a scene he would do. And again, having said that, is very reminiscent of a Hitchcock set
which
piece
of course
as
is where
well,
Brian
you know,
De Palma
because
gets all of his, yeah.
so obviously it's set behind the scenes of an opera, so you've got lots of like sort of stagecraft going on. You've got lots of set dressings, and obviously people up in balconies. And what's actually the point of this is that Elsa Faust has been tasked with assassinating the Austrian Chancellor, who is at the performance, but there is another agent from the syndicate there as well, who's tasked with making sure that she does her job, and if she doesn't, going to kill him. And then there's Tom, who is battling this other agent who and he doesn't know who to kill or who to shoot at with a gun that's made out of a flute, I think it is.
Yeah.
This mad gun. So this all plays out, and then you've got scenery going up and down and people doing different things, and you get this beautiful shot of Elsa as she's lining up the shot, and she's wearing this glorious golden dress with a split of the seam, and she sets up the shot with her elbow actually on her knee, and it's just this absolutely fantastic silhouette, something reminiscent of, I think it was a Korean film I saw that was kind of same. It was a bride doing sort of a kill shot, the very same thing, but it's just absolutely stunning the way that they set that up, and they linger on that shot because it is so beautiful. Christopher McQuarrie must have been like, I'm a genius here, this is just brilliant. And it's Brad Bird. Rogue Nation was Brad Bird, wasn't it? Yes.
Oh my God, so it was, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just this fantastic scene from start to finish. And then there's the whole element of who's going to kill who and all sorts of things. There's so many moving parts to it. And then there's an escape sequence at the end of it, which is really, really good as well, which involves a sort of callback to Jurassic Park or Jurassic World of all things, because Elsa's wearing these lovely shoes and she has to take them off in order to run, whereas in Jurassic World,
correct,
the character was wearing high heels all the time and running in them, and people were saying that's just not possible. And the Mission Impossible film came out just after the Jurassic World, so I think it was kind of a wee dig at that. But yet the whole thing from start to finish works so well, just brilliant. The fact that everything involved in that scene was for nothing. It was completely pointless because, well, I can say now that the Austrian Chancellor got killed by a car bomb as he was fleeing the assassination attempt. So it was always going to happen. There's redundancies built into these things, but it's such a good scene, and I think it's probably my favourite scene from like the whole of the eight film series, just because of the fact that it's, you know, so involved, shall we say.
Yeah, no, that is a great choice, and that silhouette is so striking. I mean, Rebecca Ferguson literally is one of the most beautiful women in the world, and that gold dress is iconic as well, a wee bit like the Fiat 500, just absolutely stunning. But yeah, I always remember that she's like, hold my shoes, is what she says, like, because she can't run in them, and I was like, yes, finally, a woman in these films who gets it.
Yeah, smashing. So, honourable mentions?
Well, definitely would be the Burge for me, because that is one of the, I mean, that is, see that picture that they took while he was like up the top and he's sitting there and he's got no shoes on and he's just sitting, chilling at the top of the tallest building in the world. And you're like, no, I'm sorry, you are insane. But that scene, yeah, because obviously, again, what I love about the Mission Impossible stunts is that in these big set pieces, there's always like a mistake or something goes wrong. And obviously with the Burge, it's the things that aren't sticking properly, so you're like, oh, you're going to plummet to your death, that's how this scene's going to end. So that's definitely a standout for me. And I think I did actually enjoy within Dead Reckoning Part 1 the train sequence where you've got Grace and Ethan sort of hanging off the train that's going sort of broken up on the track as well. But yeah, I think it's one of these franchises where there's so many incredible moments. I mean, even in the first one where basically like the entire team get killed as well. Spoilers, sorry if you haven't seen that already. But like, but even that, like it properly like sort of laid its cards out on the table from the very start, is to like, you know, don't get too attached to anyone here, or you know, don't think that this is, you know, going one way because it can always go the other. So I do think that it's been a very impressive franchise from the offset. Yeah, for me it'd be a couple of running scenes, because obviously Tom likes a good wee run. Yeah. So there's two, well, I mean, he does a bit of running in every film, but the two that kind of stand out, again, from Mission Impossible 3, where he's navigating the very busy streets
and been sort of talked along, go left, go right, and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's really good. And then there is the one in Fallout as well, the one where he injured himself, where he actually broke his ankle.
Oh, the ankle break. Oh, and
Yeah.
kept on running. Whereas I
Yes.
get like a sore foot, and I'm like, oh, that's me, I'm out.
Yep. That whole scene, because he's both of them, he's being guided by Benji.
Yes, and I
remotely.
love in Fallout where he's like, just take the next left, and he's like, no, I'm at a window. And
Yeah.
he's like, what do you mean you're at? And he has to break it with the chair, and all the office workers are just looking at him like, what the hell? And of course, that leads him up onto the rooftops. But yeah, that's how both of those are excellent sequences. Because again, there is that slight element of comedy to it as well, because Benji's following a dot and he's not taking into account obviously everything else that's going on around him, whereas Ethan has to like navigate the actual sort of like real life streets or whatever. So yeah, those kind of sequences work really well, but there is that kind of slapstick element to it as well.
Nice. So I think we are pretty much done with this one. It's been a bit of a long one as well, which is fitting, I suppose.
Yeah.
Given what we've been talking about, there's a lot to discuss in this one. More than anything else.
We're saying goodbye to a beloved franchise. We're allowed to chat about it.
Absolutely. So if you have thoughts on this particular Mission Impossible film or any in the franchise, please do get in touch with us. You can get us at all the normal social media platforms. Just look for Moviescramble. You can send us an email to podcast@moviescramble.co.uk as well. Again, let us know what you think. Let us know what you think of the podcast in general. Leave us a wee review. That would be very nice. It would be very handy. We have had a few reviews on various platforms, and it's been relatively positive. So we'd like to obviously keep that. We obviously think we're doing something right here. So, but it would be very appreciative just if someone could, let us know how you do. I am aware, obviously, that we have listeners now. I was told off.
Ooh!
I was told off quite. I was actually looking at one of the videos on our YouTube channel. All our podcasts are on there as well. And a lady, Grace, who was it? Grace? I can't remember, but she had left a message about a year ago saying it's listeners. It's not listener. There is more than one now. I listen as well, so
that is very sweet.
I thought that was really nice.
We're up to 2.
Yeah. It's always nice to be nice, isn't it? So no, it wasn't Grace. It was Jill, I should say, who had as well as sent us an email after that as well. So yeah, that was pretty nice. But yes, if you would like to drop us a note as well, please. And if you think there is anything that you think we would be happy to cover as well, then please do let us know.
However, we are taking the ballerina approach to reviews, positive only.
Yes. Yeah, quite. Yeah, we'll see how that works out. Yeah, we might not be able to be as choosy, but we shall see. Until the next time, it's cheerio from me.
Bye.